Alright, let's tier rank every single team in the NFL. The tiers are Super Bowl contenders, playoff bound, playoff hopefuls, mid, all pretty self explanatory. Hopefully competitive are teams that are bad or like have low expectations, but that category is for teams they're bad, they probably aren't making the playoffs, but hopefully they don't get blown out every game. And then garbage is just the worst teams in the league. So the Arizona Cardinals are in the hopefully competitive category. This is the first year in a while where Kyler Murray is going to be fully healthy the entire season. They added Marvin Harrison Jr., so the offense, I think, will legitimately be pretty decent to good. However, the defense concerns me a lot, and I don't have a lot of high hopes for it. So that's what I think will hold them back. But you know what? Hopefully they'll be competitive because they're in a really hard division. Atlanta Falcons, playoff bound because I do not see any other team winning the division other than them as of this moment, Friday, August 16th, because they just added Justin Simmons and Matt Judon to a defense that already improved a lot last year. On offense, you have Kirk Cousins and you have Zach Robinson as your offensive coordinator, who helped run one of the best and most, notably better than expected offenses in the NFL last year. And now, you're giving him Kirk Cousins, who's an above average quarterback, Bijan Robinson, who's probably going to be a top 5 at least quarterback or running back in the NFL this year, and then developmental pieces like Drake London and Kyle Pitts, as well as guys like Darnell Mooney who are pretty good, and the line is good. So the offense is going to be really good, and the defense is just adding new players that are good by the minute. Like you have Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates as your safety duo. That's pretty damn good. The Baltimore Ravens, I'd say they're also playoff bound. I don't know if I think they're Super Bowl contenders or not because they still don't have any receivers outside of Zay Flowers. They have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and then they have Derrick Henry and the guy that was a rookie last year who was really fast at running back, Keaton Mitchell. So those are your 5 or 6 weapons on offense, and you really need Rashad Bateman to do something. And the offensive line lost a lot of people again. The defense is going to be great, but you lose Mike McDonald, so there could be a residual effect of that. But the defense is still insanely talented. But the offense, Lamar's gonna have to be Lamarvelous, really, and I don't know if his body is going to let him do that for a full season after last year. Because he gets sick. It's not his fault, but something seems to pop up every other season. Bills, Super Bowl contenders, and while for similar reasons to Baltimore, they could be ranked in the tier below, I think that just because of how good Josh Allen is, and just they seem to have a plan. I don't think they would have gotten rid of everybody that they did without a plan, and it's probably wishful thinking. I don't, Ravens fans might be bad at this, but I just think that Josh Allen, they still have decent weapons. Keon Coleman, I think, is going to be good. Mac Hollins has been underrated for the last few years. Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox at tight end is pretty damn good. And then you have James Cook at running back, who was a star last year when he wasn't fumbling the football. And then to top it all off, you have Josh Allen, who somehow hasn't won MVP yet. And the defense still has a lot of good pieces on it. Now, they did just lose Matt Milano for most of the season, so that will have a huge impact. But as of right now, I still think that they're a Super Bowl contending team. Carolina Panthers, hot garbage until David Tepper figures out how to run one successful business. Because as of right now, his track record with sports is like Trump's track record with our country. Chicago Bears, playoff hopefuls. I don't think any team outside of Atlanta has gotten this much better in this offseason. And Caleb Williams looks to be the number 1 overall pick and presumptive star that we thought he was. And I just think that they're going to be phenomenal this year. Cincinnati Bengals, Super Bowl contenders, better than the Bills. You have a healthy Joe Burrow right now. Hopefully that stays that way through the last 2 preseason games and, just the rest of training camp. Because when he's healthy, they go to the AFC Championship game at least. They've proven that repeatedly. And, let's see if they can get over the Chiefs hump again, get to the Super Bowl, win it this time. But just another team that's loaded. They just re-signed their kicker, which is important. figure out Jamar Chase's contract, and then you have like zero distractions going into the season. Defensively, I think they might be a little bit worse this year because they've lost some pieces, but I still think this team is going to be great. The Cleveland Browns, I am going to put in playoff bound behind their division rival Baltimore, because I think this might be the best roster in the NFL outside of the quarterback position. And I think the $230 million mistake at quarterback is going to haunt this team forever and haunt the coach and GM, because I think that was a terrible decision. As of right now, if Baker Mayfield was on this team, I would have them ranked as a Super Bowl contender. But sadly, they decided to throw away the only guy to get them a playoff win in the last 3 decades for Deshaun Watson, who has an interesting history on and off the field. So that's holding them back. Dallas Cowboys, mid. I don't. This team didn't get better at all this offseason. I don't know what they've done to improve. Last year's draft was awful. Mozzie Smith didn't really do much at all. And to top it all off, the division rivals are getting a lot better, and the NFC as a whole is getting a lot better. And the vibes are dead for the Dallas Cowboys. America's team or whatever can't seem to get any fans to watch their training camp practices, which, people show up to watch. I'm trying to think of a bad team, a boring team. People show up to watch, the Giants practice, and they're not showing up to watch the Cowboys practice. And as all I can see, I'm a Giants fan, but people are showing up to watch us practice, but they're not showing up to watch the Cowboys practice. You haven't re-signed your quarterback, your best receiver, and your best defensive player, and they're all unhappy. And then, your owner saying, "Oh, we're all in," and then, making up reasons why you're not getting anything done. So I just think that they're going to be a massive letdown this year, and I, for one, cannot wait to see it happen right in front of my eyes. The Denver Broncos, I will put them at hopefully competitive behind or in front of Arizona. I think that Bo Nix is going to be really good in Sean Payton's system, because whenever Sean Payton finds a quarterback that he likes, he usually cooks with them. Shout out Drew Brees. But, there's still holes on that team, and I don't know who else they have at receiver outside of Courtland Sutton, who once again has a injury history that's long as hell, unfortunately, because he's a great player. But I just don't know what they're going to do at the receiver position after Jerry Jeudy's gone, and I think that's going to be one of the things that holds them back. Now, Tim Patrick, the guy that Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's teammate from Oregon, they might be insanely good right off the bat and prove me wrong. But as of right now, I just think that's a team that wants to be competitive and, see if they can challenge the Chiefs in their division. Lions, Super Bowl contenders, ahead of the Bengals and Bills. I, once again, think this is one of the best rosters in the NFL. This is probably the best team rebuild that we have seen a general manager and coach be a part of in recent history, because it's only been 4 or 5 years since they took over, and the vibes are completely different. Even their first year, they started off horribly. I think it was November when they won their first game, and now they are one of the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl, which is insane. And they got better. They added 3 new cornerbacks, Carlton Davis for a 3rd-round pick, which I think was a good deal for both them and Tampa Bay. And they drafted 2 corners. They need to get something out of Jameson Williams on offense to be fully complete, in my opinion. But even without that happening, you still have Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, and David Montgomery surrounding Jared Goff, and a really good offensive line. So it just comes down to the defense being a little bit better than last year, because that's what cost them a Super Bowl trip and maybe a Super Bowl win. Green Bay, I'd say that they're a playoff-bound team. Jordan Love just got paid. He's only had 1 year, and he wasn't great the entire year, so people are going to debate that contract to eternity. However, I think that team is really, really good. Once again, that team, is a young team. The vibes are great. They're coming off a really good year where no one thought that they would be good. And I think that they're going to be even better this year, because the chemistry and everything will be a lot better. And I think it shows a lot that they were willing to pay Jordan Love that much money with 1 season under the belt. They fully believe in him, and now, that gets people fired sometimes, but I don't think that'll be the case here. Houston Texans, another team that got remarkably better this season. I'd still put them behind the Bengals, because the Bengals are more proven than them. However, you add Stephon Diggs, you replace Devin Singletary with Joe Mixon, you replace Jonathan Grenard with Danielle Hunter, and you just add pieces that will help your team throughout the roster. And Tank Dell is back. Hopefully, thank God the shooting situation that happened wasn't insanely serious, where he's not able to play anymore, not able to play this year. I think Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon, and Damian Pierce. Just throw him in because he's had a couple good years. I think that is absolutely phenomenal to surround C.J. Stroud with, one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, and I'm very excited to see what they do. Indianapolis Colts, I'll say mid, but better than the Cowboys, because I think Anthony Richardson is going to be an absolute dog, and the rest of the team is pretty damn good. They finally have wide receivers, which they haven't seemed to have in a really long time. They're kind of like the Packers, where they don't really draft skill position guys in the first round or get big name people, but Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, those are the guys that can be really good. So I'm looking forward to see what they do as a team. Jacksonville Jaguars, I'd say playoff hopefuls, because I think Trevor Lawrence is a top 10 quarterback easily. I think he's hated on, especially because towards the latter end of last season, he was playing through various injuries and not playing well. But before that, they were a top 2 and for a little bit the number 1 seed in the AFC. So that's nothing to sneeze at, because the AFC is insanely competitive. And look at the 3 of the 4 teams in the Super Bowl contenders right now are AFC teams. So I think that team is slept on. However, losing Calvin Ridley is big. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be really good. Everything coming out of training camp is oh, this guy is absolutely great. But let's see what happens, because he is a rookie. I think that will hurt them a lot, but I think Trevor Lawrence is going to prove that he was worth that contract. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. I don't even have to really give a whole explanation, but you let the best quarterback potentially of all time, the best offensive coach of all time, they add Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy. And if Rashid Rice can avoid the suspension or just not do anything dumb, and the whole team actually just don't say or do anything stupid and just do football and go home, I think they're going to be the favorites to win the Super Bowl again, and might be the first team to three-peat since I don't know when. Raiders, hopefully competitive ahead of their division rivals. The quarterback is the main issue, and it's just can Antonio Pierce keep the vibes going and keep this team competitive without his message getting old? Because we see the old school tough guy coaches, sometimes their message hits really hard in the beginning, like it did when he took over for Josh McDaniels, who should never be a head coach again at any level. I don't even think he should be a head coach at PV football. He's been that bad every single time he's gotten an opportunity. But you see the tough guy message hit hard in the beginning, and then it feels, falters off, and if the team is losing, it gets really old. So I think that we're going to have to see how that goes. But outside of that, I really like Antonio Pierce. He played for the Giants. He helped us win a Super Bowl, the greatest upset in sports history. But I just, the quarterback and the offensive line are concerns for me. Chargers, playoff hopefuls, ahead of Chicago and Jacksonville, because they have Jim Harbaugh, who is one of the greatest coaches in the last 20 years, and they have Justin Herbert, who is a top 10 quarterback. And while they might not have receivers to throw to outside of Quinton, I dropped it, Johnston, I still think that they're going to be a really great team. I think they're just going to fight to the death. It's going to be like a Dan Campbell-esque mentality, because everywhere Harbaugh goes, he wins. The Rams, I want to say, the Rams are playoff bound. There's not that many good teams in the NFC. I'd put them right here. I think the only things holding me back are, will the offensive line be good the entire year? Stafford's age, and how they're going to replace Aaron Donald on defense. They have a lot of good young players on the defensive line. I think Kobe Turner should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. I really like the 2 guys from Florida State that they drafted in this year's draft, in Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. But, Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He was a Pro Bowler every year he was in the league. So losing him is going to hurt. But I think that they'll be able to figure it out, because Sean McVay is one of the smartest dudes in the league. The Dolphins, playoff hopefuls. Tua's Tua. I just think the AFC is so competitive that they might have to squeak in again and then be a wild card loss to Kansas City or Buffalo. But this team still has all the potential in the world. Once again, offensive line remains an issue. You lose Robert Hunt. You lose Connor Williams. Those guys, like the offensive line already wasn't like elite beforehand. So replacing those guys is going to be tough. Teron Armstead is older now, so he's, obviously he's injured a lot. But I don't know. I still think that they can figure it out. Once again, Mike McDaniel is like one of the smartest offensive coaches. And Tua just got paid, so he'll want to prove it. It's like confident Tua, so let's see what happens. Vikings, I'm so sad that J.J. McCarthy's out for the year. I was so excited to watch him ball out. No, everybody was hating on him coming out of the draft. I was banging the table for the Giants to take him, but that didn't happen. We got Malik Neighbors, which I'm very happy with, but like I'm just bummed that he's hurt. However, Sam Darnold season, and Kevin O'Connell made Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and Jalen Hall look like competent quarterbacks. Sam Darnold with good coaching is going to get like one of my bold predictions, which will probably be a separate video before the season starts. Sam Darnold is going to get a contract that pays him over $20 million a year after the season because he's going to look so good. So this is a mid-team. I'll be a little respectful to the Cowboys, but you still have Justin Jefferson, you have Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson. Aaron Jones is a huge addition, in my opinion, to that offense. And defensively, you got a lot better, and, Brian Flores is still there, and that defense was pretty damn good with him last year. So, second year of that under the belt. Patriots, garbage. Better than the Panthers, but, the Patriots are just let's see what Drake May can do this season. You traded away your best player on the roster probably in Matt Judon to Atlanta for a third, which is a pretty good deal because he's old and coming off of an injury. But let's see what happens with them. Saints, garbage. They're probably the best garbage team. And Derek Carr is still an average quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't outwardly suck, but that roster just needs to take 1 year, let all of the old players on massive contracts go, and reset. Kind of like what Buffalo's doing, but to a bigger level because you suck. I don't see them winning more than 6 games this year. I'm very low on them. Giants, hopefully competitive, man. I'd say they're the last team in this category for now. But, it's this team won a playoff game a year ago. Then they had every injury imaginable hit them last year. And you know what? They were driving the ball on Dallas at the beginning of that game, week 1. The field goal gets blocked. Andrew Thomas gets hurt trying to make a tackle after the blocked field goal. And the entire season goes downhill from there. But, Malik Neighbors is going to add some electricity to this roster. I think the defensive line is probably the best defensive line in the NFL in terms of your top 3, top 4 guys in Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, and Dexter Lawrence, the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL. But it's just up to Daniel Jones to see what he can do, and I have, I'd say, 45% faith that he can be a good quarterback in the NFL. Jets, playoff hopefuls, better than Jacksonville, worse than Chicago, just because it's the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is literally scripted to be the Jets quarterback. You have him touting every conspiracy theory imaginable on every platform he can get his hands on, whether it's somewhat true to completely cockamamie theories. He was also a vice presidential candidate for a little bit for the guy with a worm in his head who likes to kill bears, just like Aaron Rodgers. Coincidence. But it's the Jets. They have to figure out this Hassan Reddick situation. Trading for a guy when he wants a contract without agreeing to a contract or even somewhat frame of the contract is the most Jets thing possible. But it is what it is with that team. I still think that they'll probably get into the playoffs if Aaron Rodgers has a good season and stays healthy. I'm happy to see, or not happy, I'm excited to see Garrett Wilson with a competent quarterback for as long as Aaron plays, because sadly he hasn't had that yet. And I think either way it'll be an entertaining season. Eagles, I'd say playoff bound. I'd say they're the 3rd best team in that category. Green Bay and Baltimore are still a little bit better than them. Once again, based off of vibes and people liking each other, it's very up in the air for this team. And they replaced both coordinators again, so they'll have an adjustment period for the 3rd straight year. On top of all of that, it's just the NFC is hard, and it's the Eagles. Once again, it's a team that likes to find interesting ways to do things. And if you look at Philadelphia sports as a whole, they have found really creative ways to lose after being good in the last like 3 years. Sorry to all my Philly friends, but this is still a team that if they stay healthy and can play somewhat decent football are playoff bound. Like they started the season 10-1 last year. They were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but I just don't think that they're like a top class team as some people do. Steelers mid, once again behind. I'd put them right here. I think either way they're going to be better at quarterback than they were last year. The defense is still phenomenal. If Roman Wilson can be decent, like once he gets healthy, I think they have two good receivers, a good tight end, and two good running backs, which is good. The offensive line is probably the best it's been since like the prime Killer Bees days. So I do have high hopes for them, but at the same time, it comes down to quarterback play, and both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields have not the best reputations right now, so we'll have to see what happens with them. The San Francisco 49ers are Super Bowl contenders. However, I would put them here right now. And that is because Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams, both guys want new contracts. They're doing like a hold-in or whatever else. And on top of that, I think the Lions, Bengals, and Chiefs are just better teams right now. And I think there has to be a limit to how close you can get to the precipice of winning a Super Bowl and then not get it before it kind of sets in your head. For people that don't play sports and, are not on Super Bowl caliber teams, it's like you try to do something again and again and again, and then you kind of just end up like Sisyphus, like moving the rock up the mountain just for it to fall down again. So I want to see this team win a Super Bowl. I am a Brock Purdy stan. I think he's easily a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but I just don't know if they are capable of beating the Lions because they shouldn't have last year, to be completely honest. The Seahawks, another mid team, probably right here, right in the middle of the mid teams, because, Geno Smith is Geno Smith. I'm intrigued by the Sam Howell trade. I think that defense is going to be insane. I think this is since the prime Legion of Boom days, and I'm not comparing it to the Legion of Boom, but Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, a couple other really good young corners. Julian Love at safety is so underrated. They have Leonard Williams and a bunch of young guys on the defensive line, and they have one of the best defensive minds as their head coach. And then on offense, outside of quarterback, you have Kenneth Walker, who's a really good running back. You have two stud young tackles, and then you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba at receiver. It is a pretty stacked team. Now, imagine this team next year, Cowboys mess around with Dak Prescott and his contract. Imagine the Seahawks sign Dak Prescott. That would be hilarious. So I think that, I think that team is going to be fun to watch. They might make the playoffs, but I don't think they will. But it's still a pretty darn good team. Tampa Bay, also mid-team. I'll give them credit because they made the playoffs last year, so I'll put them right above Seattle. But, Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback when doubted, but as of right now, he's not being doubted. So, we could be looking at a down year for Baker. The weapons on offense are still phenomenal. The line is still pretty good. Defensively, they weren't nothing special last year. Let's see if they can be a little bit better this year. Maybe that can boost the team. I don't think that they're as good as Atlanta. I think Atlanta will win the division. And I think the NFC South, once again, you go 9-8, you probably win the division easily. So I don't see Tampa Bay being in the discussion of going to the playoffs. Tennessee, I'll put them right here as well. There's a lot of mid-teams, which makes sense because parity. But they have done everything in their power to give Will Levis a good roster. Now it's just up to him to run with it and show that he's capable of being a good NFL quarterback, which hopefully he does, because otherwise he's getting clowned for that Mayo commercial and some other things that have happened on the internet. But, Calvin Ridley, L'Jarius Sneed on defense, it's a team that's gotten a lot better. I don't think that they're ready to compete with the Texans. I think it's going to be the Colts versus the Titans for that number 2 spot and maybe a wild card spot, potentially, if, some of these teams peter out. But I think, once again, it'll be a really fun team to watch. And Washington, I think they are also in the hopefully competitive category. And I think they should be competitive. You add veteran guys that are, used to winning, like Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler. And Jaden Daniels seems to be he looked good in his first preseason game. He had a couple of really nice throws. And, you still have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and a couple other pieces on offense. You still have pretty good pieces on defense on the interior defensive line after you traded both ends last year. And Dan Quinn is a good coach. I don't know how great Cliff Kingsbury's offense is going to be. I think, maybe all that time spent vacationing in Thailand. I don't know what impact that's going to have on his return to the NFL. I'm sure he wants to prove a point that, he was wronged in Arizona and whatever else. But I don't think that this team is going to do anything special, but they will be fun to watch. These are my official rankings, once again, as of August 16th, for NFL teams going into the season. I think that there's a big difference between these 3 tiers and these 3 tiers, and I am excited to see myself proven wrong as the season goes on. Thank you guys for watching another episode of the No Fun League. Peace.